Hello! Welcome to your past life reading. So I've got 3 piles to pick from here. You guys probably know the drill at this point with pick a card videos. I've got a scapolite crystal here, a sigillite crystal here, and a kiwi stone little mushroom stone. Kiwi stone little mushroom stone, a kiwi quartz carved mushroom stone on pile number 3. So go ahead and pause this video if you need a little bit more time to pick your piles, and we'll go ahead and get straight into it. Welcome, pile 1. You guys picked the scapolite pile. So scapolite is a stone that's all about not being afraid to put in the hard, consistent work or effort needed to achieve any of the goals that we want to accomplish this lifetime. And so I feel like with you picking this card, that was you. You were somebody who was a very hard, dedicated, strong worker, and so any of the little things that you wanted to accomplish in your life, or any of the jobs or things that you had, to do, you were somebody who wasn't afraid to have to take the necessary labor involved to do that thing. And so the card on the bottom of the deck here, when I pulled, was kind of intended to be background energy. So this was kind of the thing that your parents did before you, and I pulled the sailor. So I feel like you guys are children of a sailor. I'm kind of picking up a particularly masculine energy here, and so I feel like you are the son of a sailor. And so as I was shuffling the deck, quote of a song that jumped out to me right before I saw the sailor card was a quote from a Billie Eilish song. I can't remember the name now, but I will write it in the description down below. But the quote is, "It's not me, it's you," and all that other bull, word I can't say here on YouTube. And so I kind of feel like with that coming up as I was shuffling for the background energy specifically is I feel like your father, this sailor dad of yours, was somebody who was very no nonsense, and also not somebody who probably believed in this kind of stuff. Somebody who may not have believed in God or divinity or source, or even if you're from a different culture, even any of the pagan gods. I think there was kind of this focus on the earth for the earth, and kind of didn't really have room to experience much magic in your life because, or his life, because he didn't believe in it. Magic is happening all around us. It is just up to us to kind of be aware of it's happening and see it happening. So that is what you descended from. So let's go ahead and get into your cards. So you've got the Chariot and the Chiromancer. So delivering news, collaboration, and the Chariot. So both of these are, the Chariot has this kind of forward motion energy to it, somebody traveling from one place to another. And the Chiromancer, delivering news, so taking one thing and taking it to another. I'm kind of picking up on the salinity in the back of my nose, very acutely, a lot more so than usual. So I feel like for some of you guys, you may have followed in your father's footsteps and become a sailor yourself. And so that would be, let's see. So I feel like with the delivering news here, it's kind of the purpose of the ship you were on may have been a delivery ship. So you were somebody who was a merchant or a just delivery person, somebody who delivers cargo from one place to another, or even a passenger ship where it's you traveled people from one place to the other. But there is this energy of kind of just traveling. Oh, and it even kind of looks a little bit like waves here on the Chariot. That's really cool. So yeah, definitely a sailor for this pile. I think you guys did follow after your parents. They may have, your parents may have even been the people who owned the ship. One of my friends is actually writing a book, or she wrote a book, and it is currently, she sent it off to the publishers and is waiting to see if it can possibly get published. So I hope it does. If it does, I will link it down below when it eventually comes out. I'm leaving a little energetic note here for myself to remember to do that. But if I don't, you guys leave a comment down below. And so one of the characters in her book, their parents were traveling merchants. And so I feel like with that kind of being brought to my mind, that could even be the specific thing that your ship did, is they were merchants. Your family was just a merchant family where they owned a ship, and they had their own business, kind of going to exotic lands and trading the kind of goods from various places. Along with that, you know, the people in the book had this kind of like life of not luxury, obviously not, but they did have kind of like access to nicer things than people who don't kind of go out and see the world around them. And I think that could be where that kind of hard work and dedication for you came from, is like you saw kind of like the fruits that hard work could bring for you. So it's like when you know, even though it was hard to sail the ships and go back and forth and see all of these things, it's like you got to see so many things that you wouldn't have gotten to see if you had just not been a sailor, you know? And so I feel like with that difficulty, there was just like so much excitement and wanderlust and like new things that you got to experience that were just like awesome for you. And that's one of the reasons that I think you just like loved this job. So, all right, the next cards that we have here, you've got the Eight of Swords in reverse and the Tailor also in reverse. So the Tailor is alteration to detail and pride in reverse. So that says attention to detail, not alteration to detail. I feel like that may be a little significant. So let's see. So Eight of Swords in reverse. So I feel like this is tapping a little bit into that kind of like experiencing new things, kind of like wanderlust type situation. The Eight of Swords, when it's upright, is all about feeling very trapped and helpless, kind of like confined by expectations and other ideas that other people have about you. With it being in reverse, I think that's definitely not a thing that you experienced. I think because you got to travel around so much, it's almost like you didn't really have that like communal expectation on you that I think a lot of people have when they do stay in one place for a long time, where it's like when people grow up with you or they kind of are around you for a long time, they start to get an idea of like who you are and what to expect when they interact with you. But I feel like for you guys who are watching this pile, I feel like for pile 1 here, it's like you guys weren't limited by that. I feel like for some of you, you may have even tried out kind of like different, not like personalities per se, but it's like you just kind of tried different things. It's like when you're in different places, I think you kind of like tried to fit the culture, understandably, as one does. When in Rome, do as the Romans, right? And so because of that, I think you kind of really got this like expanded sense of self where it's like you didn't really feel confined by having to do this or having to do that or having to behave this way and it be societally accepted or having to behave this way and it being societally accepted, because you saw so many different types of people around you and so many different ways of living. And that, I think, really just provided a big sense of freedom. Even with the Chariot here, that also has a sense of freedom to me. And obviously the big open seas. I feel like freedom. That was such a big thing for you during that lifetime, was this sense of freedom. And so the Tailor card being in reverse here. So attention to detail in reverse and pride in reverse. With it being attention to detail in reverse, I feel like for this, it's like, even though this was this kind of like very freeing way you had to live, it's almost like you didn't really have to kind of like fine tune certain like social behavioral type things. So it's like, because you were always a foreigner, people were kind of like, they always expected you to be a little bit off or a little bit different, or kind of like not always like, you know, understanding the social customs. And so because of that, I think there were some times where there was a bit of distance between you and other people, and even sometimes when you did try to come home after traveling for a bit, I think you kind of like were a little bit aware of kind of like the difference that provided. But I feel like with this being in reverse here, I think this isn't something that you look too closely into. I think it was just a thing that kind of pinged at you from time to time. But you know, if that's the only downside, is a little bit of weirdness for a life filled with so much freedom and opportunity, you know, I think that's kind of like a better thing to have. But with that being there, that kind of like negative side of that scale, imaginary scale that I was just holding, I feel like that may be a lingering thing that you feel even like today, is like you may have a little bit of social anxiety, and kind of like a particular need to want to try to fit in with other people around you, just because that's something that I think you didn't really get to work on a lot in that past lifetime. And so now, because I think, you know, just as a society, we care so much about strong and healthy communication. I think that's kind of why you may have even chosen to incarnate in this particular timeline after this previous lifetime, was to kind of work on that one thing that you didn't quite get to do that last lifetime. Okay, So the external cards here, you've got the Judgment card and the Miser in reverse. So this pile here is kind of like how other people see you in the situation or how they viewed your life. So Judgment, Miser in reverse. I feel like with the Judgment card here, so the Judgment card, it can be about kind of like external judgment, which would kind of link in a little bit to what we were just talking about here, where it's like, you know, there was kind of like, I think, a lot of judgment around you maybe, just because you were a foreigner. You know, obviously you didn't understand all of the customs, and so sometimes you may have done things that offended people, or, you know, just kind of wasn't socially the best to do. And so there was a little bit of that evil eye energy that you could have been picking up on and may have affected you a little bit in that last lifetime. But with that being here and with the Miser being in reverse, so stubbornness and inflexibility in reverse, I feel like kind of like you were aware of little things like that when they did come up for you. And so you did try your best to fit in and, like, you know, again, do as the Romans did. So I really don't feel like this was such a big issue for you. I think it may even be like you thought it was a worse situation than it was in a past lifetime, which may be why some social anxiety is as strong as it is just because there is this internal fear, even though there wasn't quite as much of a negative opinion on you as you thought there was. But Miser in reverse too, I think you were a very generous person as well with the people around you. I think because you had a little bit of extra money and you knew that you experienced kind of all of these awesome, wonderful things, I think on the times when you know, were able to come home and revisit like your homeland and like, you know, see the people that you grew up with again, I think you were very generous. Like, you know, you wanted to share your wealth and your experiences so these other people who didn't quite have the same opportunities as you did, you know, they can also kind of like receive some of that same joy that you did, because that's ultimately what it is. It's trying to share joy and happiness and like spreading that to the world around you. So with both of those being there, I do think you had a really good social life. Again, it's like there was, I think, that distance between you and other people just provided by the lifestyle, but I don't think people viewed you negatively by any means. And I think, again, when you did come home, it's almost like there was like this like constant like reset. I'm almost even seeing kind of like the cyclical nature of this. So one of the other things for the Judgment card is kind of like these. So it's the like, it represents the like what's it called? Not Ragnarok. That's the biblical version of that, like Revelation. So it's like the book of Revelation where it's like the dead are, you know, it's like all of these things are happening. The dead are being risen from the dead and like being judged again and kind of like all of this stuff. And it's like they come and walk the earth for a little bit, which sounds a little bit like reincarnation to me, like, you know, people who were passed away coming back and living lives in the real world again, but that's just my opinion. Anyways, it's this, okay, because it's the book of Revelation, it is the closing of a chapter. It is like something ending, one world ending, and then a new world pops up and exists right afterwards, like with Ragnarok, the original one that I mentioned. So with this card being here, it's almost like every time you kind of came back to your homeland, it's like you saw it as just like being a whole different world. And I think that's kind of like as you traveled around, it's almost like you were constantly in new worlds, you know? And never really had a place to really like sit down and stabilize and grow your roots. And so that could also kind of be why there was a little bit of this kind of like saltiness that I was sensing at the beginning, is because things were so like constantly changing. And like you kind of almost couldn't quite like hold on to things, I think, as steadily or stably as you wanted them to at certain times. You know, that's just the thing that I picked up on here. I think that's the thing that kind of bothered you a little bit, and I think you could kind of like, the people around you could maybe sense that a little bit, and maybe that could be one of the reasons why they felt like you needed to share this, like maybe you were a little overly generous sometimes, which I don't think is always a bad thing, you know. I think it's fun to be fun to other people. But, you know, we're kind of getting into the more nuanced kind of social aspects here because that's what wants to come out for some reason. But I really do feel like there was, because all of these social things keep coming up, I really do feel like connections to the people around you were really important to you. And that's probably one of the things that you love the most from all of your experiences traveling, and a lot of the stories that you probably told other people were about the people that you met. So it's like, oh my goodness, I went and met this person in Istanbul and they run this amazing like restaurant and their brother is a shoemaker and he told me about this thing and oh my gosh, it was awesome. And then you like show off your little souvenirs and stuff. I think there was a lot of joy in that. Like, just like I'm sensing so much joy from you and the people around you. And like, I think because you cared so much about the people around you, that's kind of why, again, you care so much now in the particular ways that you do. Okay. And so the last cards here, so this is, why is this important? You know, why is this particular past life and, you know, just like messages, like why are these the things that decided to come through today, rather than anything else that you could have clicked on, chosen, or, you know, that I could have talked about. And so you've got the Knight of Swords upright and the Guide card also upright. So inheritance and correction. And so the Knight of Swords is all about moving forward on something pretty quickly. And it's like this energy, so it's in the Suit of Swords, which is a very, very quick paced thing. And then the Knights also have this very strong forward motion, also like the Chariot card. So very interesting. Why is this important? I feel like some of you may be needing to do something like this again. I feel like as I was telling you about kind of some of these experiences, I think some of you were in your head being like, wow, oh my gosh, that sounds so nice. Like that just sounds kind of like a perfect life for me. Go ahead and do it. You know, it's like we don't have to be sailors anymore, you know, because that I think has, you know, it's like a very dangerous profession, but I think it's a very noble profession. Like obviously we need cargo ships in order to take things from point A to point B. And like fishermen and stuff for the people who eat fish. But with this being in the Suit of Swords, which is ruled by air, I think some of you guys could be like an airline pilot or hostess, not hostess, stewardess, if you wanted to. I feel like that would be something that really just excites you and really is a thing that, you know, you would be awesome at. I think it's like, you know, the same things that are carrying over from this past life for you of traveling and meeting people and experiencing new things and all of these kind of like things that go along with just traveling and souvenirs and like, you know, all of that. I think that's a thing that's still very exciting sounding to you. And I think that's why your guides brought, that's why your guides brought you to me here today, is to kind of like help you recognize that for yourself. So inheritance and correction, it's like you're inheriting that from this past life, and that's also, I think that sense of freedom is something that you inherited from your parents as well. They really did help show you the world. And so I think you can, you know, your parents may be able to help you with that. For some people out there, maybe your parents may have been involved in the airline industries or something like that, or like that branch of the military or something, the Air Forces, sorry. And so I think it's like, especially with the bell here, the bell kind of reminds me of like the call for some reason, like answering the call. And so I feel like this could be a call for you. You know, if this is a thing that sounds cool to you, go ahead and jump into that with both feet. It doesn't necessarily have to be like an airline stewardess or steward. You could also do like Uber or taxi driving or anything that sounds good to you, honestly. But I think if you involved something that was like travel oriented in your life, a travel influencer, if you can make it, you know, that would be the best job, right? But you know, anything like that, I think you could do. And I think because this is something that you kind of already have this built up energy from this past life for, I think it's a thing that would work out very well for you, because it's like energetically you're kind of just falling right back in rhythm into some grooves that are already worn into the pavement. So, and the last card here is the Initiation. It was in reverse, but I flipped it over to read it. Rite of Passage and Crossing the Threshold. So with it being Initiation in reverse, I kind of feel like, again, this is a thing where it's like, it's not going to feel like such a big hurdle to you if you do want to do this lifetime, because it is something that you already have done on a soul level and have that experience for. And I really do feel like that would just kind of like fit right into place for you. So if if this reading has changed your life and you decide to become an airline stewardess, or if you already are an airline stewardess slash steward, go ahead and leave me a little airplane emoji down below or something. But yeah, thank you so much, pal number one, for watching this. If you liked any of the decks that I used, you can go ahead and purchase those on my website. I don't have all of them listed as of the time of posting this video, but I am constantly updating them every single week, so go ahead and keep checking back if you don't see the one that you want. And yeah, go ahead and leave a like, comment, and subscribe down below, and I'll see you guys in your next video. Bye. Welcome pile 2! You guys picked the Sigilite stone, which is actually the same stone as the cuff that I'm wearing too. This is one of my favorite stones. I like to work with it and wear it a lot. The thing that I use it for personally is it's really good for helping you kind of make these little subtle shifts in like how you perceive or do or act or say certain things to kind of, I guess, just kind of like better get your intent or just kind of optimize what it is you're trying to do across. And yeah, and so this kind of paired with the Brawler card, to me, oh, and Sigilite is a stone that is pretty much only found in two locations. The first place they originally found it was in Japan, and they first found just like a little itty bitty tiny speck of it, and it took them 3 whole more years to find another itty bitty little speck of it. And then most of it comes from South Africa nowadays, but I think that's really cool. When I worked in a crystal store, that was like a story that I would tell a lot of people about it. And yeah, so I think that being the locale, and with Brawler, and with that kind of energy of that like subtle shift in how you do things, I think this means there's a like little bit of like a martial arts or like jiu-jitsu background specifically, since I think that's like one of the main martial arts in Japan. But anything that's like a martial art in Japan, I think that could be the background for this. So this card right here, the Brawler, is kind of like background energy. So this is, or it's like a card on the bottom of the deck. So to me, that's kind of like a thing that you shared with your parents, and that's a thing that you kind of like inherited from them, and that's kind of like a foundational like lineage kind of type thing. And I figured that out in the last reading because I just thought it was about to be the parents. And then I got a super strong like saline smell in my nose because it was like a sailor thing that was super cool. I don't know if I've ever had Claire, whatever they call like clear smelling. I've never had that before, but I so distinctly like smelled the ocean. It was wild. So yeah, so this is a thing that I think you have a like lineage of, or it's like your parents did this. Okay, so we got into that. And so with that, you have that martial arts background here. And yeah, so jiu-jitsu or martial arts, a lot of that is about just kind of like these subtle shifts and kind of like stance or how we approach specific things. And I feel like that is going to be kind of like a predominant thing that carries through this whole reading, is kind of like as a person, that was like a big personality trait of just kind of like you was like, rather than kind of doing these big grandiose things, it's like you just kind of looked for these little small subtle things that you could do to kind of like maximize your results, which is a big part of the kind of martial arts thing, is like you, as your opponent moves, you're kind of moving around in these different stances and stuff, so that when they do approach you or you choose to attack, it's like kind of like most optimized by just kind of like these little subtle things. It's like truly mastering like the energy of the art, you know? So, okay, so we've got Queen of Cups and the Spy Master in reverse, and it is calling me to read the 2 cards down here, so lack of empathy and confrontation. So I feel like these, along with that kind of brawler mentality, this could be a thing that you struggled with your parents in particular during that lifetime, or a thing that again carried over, so kind of like generational trauma and stuff like that. But for your card here, you got the Queen of Cups upright, so I feel like you were definitely a woman in this past life. So even if you are male this life, you know, we always change gender between lifetimes, and kind of like, you know, we choose to either linger in one for a couple of lifetimes, or we switch back and forth pretty readily, but, you know, depending on what it is, it kind of changes our experience between those lifetimes, depending on what you had previously. And so with that being there, the Queen of Cups to me is this very like soft, gentle, nurturing card. It always reminds me of the zodiac sign of Cancer, where it's kind of just like this warm person who just kind of wants to take you in, make you feel like you're at home with them, and just kind of like, they're always like that loving therapist friend almost, where they just kind of want to make sure that like you're feeling okay and having a good time. With that being the card here, I feel like you were just like a very empathetic person, which is really interesting because of that lack of empathy that we pointed out in the Brawler card. So I feel like that could have been a point of contingency between you and the people around you, particularly the people who raised you, as if maybe they were a little bit more in this kind of like fighter mindset. Where it's kind of like, you know, having to be very self-disciplined and strict and rigid, and you were somebody who wanted to be a little bit more soft and open and understanding of situations and didn't have to keep everything in. That could have been difficult for you guys to work through, but I do think you were able to find each other again kind of like with this. The card in reverse here is Spy Master, so knowledge and distrust in reverse. With the Queen of Cups, to me, again, just being very kind of like open and honest and loving and nurturing, and the Spy Master being in reverse, I really do feel like you were somebody who didn't really have many like hidden motives or agendas. You kind of just tried to live as honestly as you could. And a thing that just popped into my head is like Shinto, which I believe is like the main religion of Japan, or one of their big ones that they have over there. And even the kind of like crown that she's wearing to me is like vaguely reminiscent of some of like the headpieces that the Japanese priestesses would wear back kind of like, you know, like in the temples and stuff. And so I feel like you may have even ended up becoming a like priestess or a, they still call them nuns, like for the opposite of monk, or not opposite, but like the female version. Is that still a nun? But yeah, so I feel like you were a priestess, because this to me looks more like a priestess kind of like head garb. I feel like you were a priestess at a temple. And yeah, we're just a very open, honest person, and kind of like communed with the divine very specifically. I know that they also do things in temples where I think there's like, you know, they leave offerings and stuff, and these to me even look a little bit like the offering bowls and the cups that they would leave of like food and water. So, all right, so coming from a kind of like martial arts specific background, maybe even your parents were somebody who like owned a dojo, and that could be why it's coming up so prevalently here, and that's kind of what I couldn't quite pin down earlier. And then you moved on to become a priestess at a temple. All right. And so your personal cards here. So you've got the Devil and the Alchemist. Very interesting. So the Devil card is all about kind of like bad habits and addictions and stuff like that. It's all about kind of like our personal devil getting the best of us. So maybe you were somebody who helped to kind of like ward off like evil spirits or something. The card is upright. Very interesting. So let's see. So the Alchemist is about balance, invention, and destruction. So destruction. So the Devil card is about kind of like personal bad habits and like addictions getting the best of us. And when that happens, it's almost like this devil kind of gets put up on a pedestal above our own wants and needs and our ability to kind of connect to the people important to us, which is why the lovers are at the base of his altar in the traditional one. You can kind of see it here, but it's a little bit blended into the background. So with that being here, it could be that one of the reasons that you ended up becoming a nun is because you had some of these kind of like destructive behaviors, whether it be you had an addiction, like the Alchemist kind of looks like a wine bottle to me, or sake. That actually does look like a sake bottle or something, or the shape of it is a little bit more so, maybe not, I don't know. Okay, but whatever it is, okay, it actually looks like whiskey. Okay, so with that here, it's like I definitely feel like you may have struggled with just kind of like being an alcoholic or something, maybe even because you became a little bit too engrossed in that kind of just like fighter mentality, and something felt kind of like missing to you and you went seeking that out, and then you went away to become a nun because it was just kind of easier for you to do that, or that seemed a little bit more appealing to you in some way. So, and I feel like that would be the balance too. So if you were so destructive of a force before, it's almost like you internally wanted to create this balance by being as gentle and nurturing as you could on the other side of that. So you went through a very intense kind of like personal transformation before this. You know, if another tarot card comes up with the Death card, that would be really cool. That would also make a lot of sense kind of in this, because it's about that really strong kind of like ego death or personal transformation. But okay, so that's your personal side here. This is the external. So this is kind of like how you interacted with other people or how other people viewed you. You've got the Eight of Pentacles and the Storyteller with viewpoints and control. Eight of Pentacles is all about being kind of like a very steady, dedicated, hard worker. To me, this has like blacksmith energy, where it's like when a blacksmith is creating a sword, or a katana, since we're in Japan, It's not about the kind of like it's like not like hammer, 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 poof, oh my gosh, a sword just appeared. Oh my gosh, especially not in the olden days. Or it's like, you know, even katanas specifically. It's like there's so much like, you know, the folding of the steel, you've got to melt it. I think they used to even like filter it, like the iron from sand. I used to be a huge weeb. I know a lot about Japanese culture, so I'm kind of glad this is coming up here. But you know, there's so much effort and like intention in that goes into like the process of creating the thing that makes it such high quality. You know, that's why the craftsmanship is like, you know, one of the things that Japan is known for across the world is like the quality of their craftsmanship. And it's because they take a lot of care and attention into the work that they do. It's like, you know, they just care, like, you know, yeah. And so I feel like for you too, it's like the people around you viewed you as just like a really strong, dedicated worker. Like the things that you did for the temple, you know, if you did any little bits of like magic, or you did like, you know, you prayed for people on their behalf, or you made them little charms or offerings, like the various things that the temple would offer to the people around them. I think you did a really good job at what you did, and the people really admired that about you and saw you as a hard worker. You probably had a very clean, like well-kept temple, and just like the people noticed that. The other card here is Storyteller. So viewpoints and control is a little interesting. So Storyteller makes a lot of sense with the priestess. One of the, you know, a lot of traditions are oral traditions where they kind of tell the stories of their different deities or notable figures, and kind of like there's a lot of meaning and messages behind, you know, those different stories and archetypes that we encounter, and they kind of help us learn more about the world around us. And they become a little bit more personal as we see ourselves kind of living out little bits of that story. Viewpoints and control. Kind of feel like for this, it's like the viewpoints. I'm really called to the animals here. It's like this is a little bit more negative, but I feel like this is a more positive thing. I feel like, again, you kind of did your best to get away from, you know, these more negative aspects of yourself. I feel like that's a thing that you really strive towards overcoming. And again, I think people saw that about you, and maybe the control doesn't have to be a negative thing. Yeah, I guess they don't have to be negative. It's just viewpoints and control. Control can be self-control too. You know, I think you had a lot of self-discipline, a lot of self-control. And I think with your viewpoints too, I think because you came from the background that you did, and, you know, definitely you struggled with the things that you did, I think that made you very approachable to the people that you did work with, and you were able to work with them very well because of that nuanced background for you. You were able to tell a lot of stories with the things that you did that really helped people, along with the kind of stories that everybody can tell, you know? And yeah, and particularly for the animals here, those may be even be like 2 animal spirits that you worked with in that past lifetime. Those are both animals that are found in Japan. This to me is reminiscent of a fox, the kitsune, and this is like a deer. And you know, we've seen like the deer in like the parks that'll like bow to the people. Wherever that region of Japan is, I'm like the Nahara or something like that. I could be wrong. I'll try to put that on the video. I haven't figured out how to edit that yet. So if I didn't, I'm going to link it down below in the kind of like not comment, but the description section. But you may have lived in that particular region with those deer there. But okay. And so this is, why is this important? So why is this the particular past life that is brought to you today? Why you're here now, watching it now at this moment in time? Which, how interesting, isn't it, that this little moment from the past is meeting you here now, in the past where I am filming this, and is now meeting you in the future. That hasn't happened yet, so there's a past, present, future happening here. But okay, so we've got the Ten of Pentacles with the Captain, so taking command and teamwork. So Ten of Pentacles to me is all about this kind of like graduation energy. It's like the Suit of Pentacles deals with the earthly realm, so it's kind of like finances, health, where you live, the places you go on a frequent kind of like day-to-day basis, so like your habits, routines, the daily physical stuff. With it being here, it's kind of like graduating in some way. So this could be graduating from a school situation, graduating from being a brawler to being a priestess. It's this transition. So it's like because you've kind of fully wrapped up a cycle in one area of your life, now you have this time, energy, and just availability to kind of like do this other thing. So it's like once you graduate from high school, or middle school, we'll say, you go on to high school. And some people graduate high school and go on to college, but people do different things. And so with this being here, I think your spirit guides are saying that it's time for you to kind of go through a big transition. Maybe you've been a brawler, or maybe you're in the stable energy here. And it's time for you to transition into something that's a little bit more suited to kind of what it is that you ultimately want to be doing. Create a sense of balance in your life, to kind of like countervent these kind of like destructive behaviors that you've done for yourself. And by kind of transitioning into this newer, healthier thing for you, I think you will take command and just kind of like, you know, have a little bit more self-control. I guess is like the big thing that came up. So maybe some of you guys are still kind of like in this devil energy here, and it feels like you're still fighting that fight. But yeah, it's saying that it's like, you know, I think you are now just kind of like, you know, it's like some things take time, everything takes time. At the very least, some seeds are being planted that this transition for you is on the horizon and can happen for you when you choose to make it happen. You know, like for the college thing, you know, not everybody goes to college. Some people drop out of college, but you can always go back to it, finish out your degree, and choose to graduate then. But there is this kind of like, again, transitioning out of one cycle into the next one. With the taking command and teamwork here, taking command of yourself, teamwork, I feel like in this kind of like graduation, so it's like once you transition and kind of work through this energy here, so I feel like, again, a lot of the people who are watching this settle different ways of doing things. Maybe it's like in your day-to-day life, this just kind of takes up a little bit more of your time than is necessary or it should be. And so by just doing it a little bit less, maybe not cutting it out entirely, maybe you're not like a full-blown alcoholic, but you just drink a little bit more than you would like to, or whatever your particular vice may be. I feel like if you take just kind of like these little subtle shifts here, and you just kind of make a slightly different approach to your day-to-day life, that could be one of those ways that that kind of hard work comes out for you. But with the teamwork here, I feel like once you kind of go through this transition and you kind of enter into this new story for yourself, you are going to kind of like meet new people, and work alongside other people in whatever new avenue this is for you. And that's one of the reasons why they kind of like wanted to bring this to your attention, is they just wanted to let you know that there are other people kind of like waiting for you on the other side of this transition, and they are waiting to welcome you in with open arms. So whatever transition you have been thinking about making lately, go ahead and start taking steps towards making that transition. Things don't have to happen overnight, and it's actually best if things don't happen overnight, so you have a little bit of time to kind of build into them naturally, and so your roots have time to grow and establish, since we're in the suit of pentacles, and that also reminds me of plants as it grows and develops. So yeah, I just felt like the need to call that out for somebody there. All right, and the oracle card was Answer the Call. What is your soul calling you to do? And this card was in reverse, but I'm going to answer my call and say that this is upright. I feel like this is kind of like this graduation thing that it's talking about here, where it's like, I think you are on the precipice of answering some call. So maybe this is kind of like you want to be a little bit of like a priestess. Maybe it's like, as I was calling this out, that sounded very appealing to you. This actually was a thing that came through in the first reading too, where it was like at the end of it, it was like, and this is a thing that you could do this lifetime. So this could be a thing that you do this lifetime. Whether it be a priest or a priestess, you know, it could just be somebody who is a little bit more mystic, or somebody who does tarot or stuff like this. It's actually interesting. I was looking up the word prophet today, because that was a thing that's been coming up for me a lot. And the original like meaning of prophet just meant one who like spoke for spirits, which to me, it feels a lot like kind of like what this is. You know, I'm just kind of speaking for source or your higher self or your past life, and kind of conveying the messages that I convey. And yeah, so I don't know. I feel like that could definitely be a thing for some of you guys out there, where it's like, you know, just like working with spirits and kind of like relaying the messages of the higher realms to the people that you feel called to share those things with. And I think that's kind of why we have the answer the call here. So what is your soul calling you to do? Whatever it is that this feels like it should be for you, whatever way that you can incorporate a little bit more of the divine into your day-to-day life. I kind of originally pulled these cards as like profession. So again, you know, your profession was a priestess, so that could even be something that, again, you do as a profession today in your current lifetime, if that's the thing that so calls out to you. But yeah, that is what I have for you guys. Pile number 2. If you liked any of these decks, you can go ahead and purchase those on my website. I may not have all of them. I think I don't have this one on there quite yet, but I am working on getting all of them, so that may be in within the next couple of months or so from posting this. So thank you guys. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe down below, and leave me any comments for any videos you would like to see in the future, what you want to see me read about. And take care. Bye. Welcome pile 3. You guys picked the kiwi quartz little mushroom here. So I wanted this reading to have a starseed one so bad in it, and I was going to be like, oh, it's a UFO, but no, this really wanted to stay here on Earth. So all of these past life readings have been here on Earth. Yeah, so the kiwi stone here is, I think it's said it's made of like quartz, amazonite, and black tourmaline, and so it's said to have the like communicative properties of the amazonite with the grounding effects of tourmaline. So it's supposed to be really good for public speaking, which is perfect with the card on the back of the deck. So the card on the back of the deck, this is kind of like what your parents were, but obviously if your mother was a queen, what do princesses usually become? The queen. And with all of the other ones, these cards have been things that they have like shared with their parents. The first reading that I did, I pulled the sailor and I was just going to read it as that's what the parents were. But then when I was doing the kind of like middle card, or like the next card here, which is the kind of like what you were in that lifetime, I got the strongest just like ocean smell in my nose. Like I was so keenly aware of like the saline that's already in there, that I was just like, oh, and you were also a sailor. Like that is the first time I've ever had that clair smelling, clair olfactory, I don't know what that's supposed to be called, the like, you know, there's like clairvoyance, clairsentience, clairaudience, and they're supposed to be clear smelling too. That is the first time in my life I've ever had that to my knowledge. That was super cool. So that is the connection there. You know, I do think this is a thing. Like you were the princess who became the queen. So if there were kind of like other children of the court, you were the one who actually became royalty. So you were probably the firstborn in this situation. And yeah, the 2 cards underneath here are determination and sacrifice. So, you know, obviously with royalty, there does come a lot of sacrifice that needs to be made in order for the greater good of the country. I feel like it's a very glamorized position, but it's kind of only glamorous if you're the ones that take advantage of the people beneath you, or at least to like the opulence of like Louis XIV and like the French, I guess it's really the French ruling class before the French Revolution that you hear about. It's all like so terrible, like, you know, let them eat cake with Marie Antoinette and all that. But the kiwi stone is from New Zealand, so I do feel like you were... Oh, and wasn't New Zealand a thing underneath the Queen? Like, didn't Queen Elizabeth, or not Queen Elizabeth, but like one of the queens send people to New Zealand? Interesting. So you may have been a queen in like Europe. It's like, I think way back in like medieval Europe days, there were a lot of like castles and stuff. You know, it's like, I think some countries even to this day, it's like you can like buy a castle really cheap if you fix it up. I think there was a famous singer who did that even, like Celine Dion or someone like that. If you know who that is, go ahead and leave a comment down below. I'm sure, you know, that's a fun little tidbit of information. I'm sorry I don't have the name off the top of my head. But I feel like you could have been one of the people who was like the lord or lady, or just like, you know, the person who ruled over like your respective castle. And so you were the firstborn of the queen. All right. And for your cards here, so this is kind of like what your job was. And so for yours, this is kind of going to be like, we already know, you know, if your mom was the queen, you were the queen, that's your job. That's kind of like, you're not like the job and also have a part-time, you're not the job, you're not the queen and also have a part-time job at like McDonald's or Burger King or something like that, you know. The queen having a part-time job at Burger King, that would be so funny. I love to laugh at whoever spirit guide brought that through for me. So for you, you've got the Page of Cups with the twins in reverse. So you may have even been, interesting, with the twins in reverse, kind of the first thing that popped into my head is I don't think you were necessarily like the firstborn, but I think you may have been like the child that made it. You know, like back in medieval Europe, there were a lot of, diseases and stuff. They didn't quite have figured out how to deal with them. You know, people were dying of like polio and smallpox all the time and like stuff like that. Not to laugh about it, it's just, you know, nervous chuckle. But with the twins in reverse, you could have even had like a twin born with you, and you were the one that just kind of like ended up surviving. Or with the twins being in reverse, it's just kind of calling to like, you know, a sibling or something like that, with it being reverse saying not quite a sibling. But anyways, in the context of the reading, I think it's like, you know, somebody who came before you ended up passing and you were the one who kind of had to take up the cup, so to speak, which is why that's there. So it's like you had to kind of step up to the plate. And so with that, if you weren't necessarily being trained to be the queen from a young age, you know, you were being, you know, guided to be a princess who, like, you know, helps assist and rules other parts of the kingdoms. You know, it's like they all had their own roles and responsibilities that they had to undertake. And so I feel like with this, it's like you may have had a feeling of being a little bit like rushed here, or it's like, you know, with determination, I feel like, you know, obviously it's a big responsibility, but I think you bore that responsibility really well and were really determined to kind of step up and be a really good ruler to the people around you. I think because it was kind of like thrust upon you, you kind of just felt so much responsibility to kind of have to do a good job for it. But okay, and so it's kind of like you get two little personal cards here, I guess, since it ended up being like your job was the queen. Okay, but so for you, so this is kind of like, again, your personal part of it. You've got, so this will be like your personality, we'll say. You've got the well in reverse and the patron in reverse, so mentorship and finances. So interesting. With the well in reverse, so the well is all about, so this is one of two additional major arcana cards that this particular deck adds that's not a part of the usual tarot system, but it's kind of this energy of having gone through the whole major arcana story, and then like, it's the card right after the world, so it's like after you kind of wrap up or close up a cycle, you look back at everything you just went through and you kind of draw inspiration from that. With it being in reverse here, oh, and interesting, and with mentorship and finances in reverse, you may have even had your, like, if this was like a sibling who passed away, it could even be that your kind of like mother passed away with them as well, or it could be that maybe if it's the twins in reverse, so maybe you didn't have any siblings even, you know, maybe there's a couple of different ruling people, or I think we mentioned a couple of different countries, so I think there will be a couple of different scenarios for a couple of different people kind of regarding this. But there's something about kind of like not doing the things that people before you had done. So some of you, I think it's like your mother maybe wasn't the best queen, or it's like, you know, I guess it's like the king and the queen would have ruled together. I don't know what the specific dynamics of the aliveness or togetherness of your past life parents, but you know, it's like, I think it's like you didn't like the way that the previous rulers had ruled, you know, and so I think you decided to do things a lot differently from them. For some of them, I feel like this could be you like chose to do things differently. For other people, I feel like there's going to be some where it's like something kind of like tragic happened, whether it be like somebody broke into the castle and threw it and you know, just like overthrew it, but then it's like your knights came in and like saved the day, and so it's like the country won, but like you lost a couple of members of your family in that process, and so you didn't really have that same mentorship in order to kind of like guide you through that whole process. For others of you with the finances in reverse, it could be that it's like you didn't have the finances to do all of the things that the previous generation had done before, so you kind of had to be a little bit ingenuitive with the things that you did for kind of like your people in order to try to make everything work out. If that was the thing that you did, hopefully you weren't one of them who was like taking all of the taxes from people. That would not be ideal. Okay. So next one here, you know, but for some that could be the case, and we can live and learn from that, right? Okay, so with the next card here, so this is external people. So this is like the way that other people saw you. So this would kind of be like your subjects, I guess, or if you had like a king or something, overthinking, these will be your subjects. Okay. So interesting, Smith. So your kind of like kingdom may have been particularly well known for like their blacksmithing even. But okay, so the main card here is the Four of Swords in reverse. So the Four of Swords when it's upright is all about taking time to like pause and think and really like sit through a situation. It's interesting. So it's like when it's upright, it's about this positive, like, you know, taking time to sit and think about a situation. And there's usually like a little denotation that you're in like a church. So it's like communing by taking time to be still, you commune with the divine to get insight and information into things. But you've got that in reverse with the Smith card upright with the overthinking. So it's almost like, it's like it's like you didn't really take time, or it's like the people around you. So it's like this thinking too much. It could be because you had this kind of like, you know, obviously and understandably just like huge responsibility kind of like thrust upon you, or it's like you had to kind of take up the helm before you were ready. I really feel like you tried very hard to just like you thought too much about stuff, and that could be the main thing that people around you thought, was just that like you're thinking too hard about it, or it's like you're putting too much mental stress on yourself. Maybe the people around you even tried to, you know, like you had advisors and stuff, they tried to lessen that mental burden for you. When I was talking about this, I was called to notice the like sword for the queen, which in the suit of tarot, the like single sword represents the Ace of Swords, which is all about ideas and a mindset. So it's interesting that this is in reverse, and it's like the sword is pointing downwards too. So it could have even been that your, like, you know, your mother, the queen before you, was also a really big overthinker, and that could have even stressed out over into her advisors and stuff. But it makes a lot of sense too, where it's like if you're ruling a whole country, you really want to make sure you're putting a ton of thought and effort into the decisions that you make. And so with this being the external side here, it really could be that you had a lot of people who did do a lot of the thinking for you, and it's like they overthought and saw through all those little nitty-gritty details and stuff about it. So it's like you didn't have to have as much mental stress on you. This could have even been like off-burdening some of this to your advisors, but I kind of feel like that's what it is. It's like, you know, everybody has their roles and responsibilities. You may have even felt guilty about putting as much work on these people as you did, but, you know, they were there to do a job, and so I think they felt very happy doing this job for you. So much so that even through this quantum of space and time, they wanted to come through this tarot reading, through the mouth of a person that neither of you had ever met, to tell you that they appreciated all the work and effort that you put into what you did, and it's like they loved what they did and the fact that they were able to help you kind of smith and create these awesome, you know, taking actions like tactical plans to shape and mold the country. Like, that's awesome. And it's like, you know, for all of the stress that it caused, I think there was a lot of reward in it for these people, because again, they are kind of smithing these flowers and stuff, or like the flowers are coming off of the hand, and the queen is like, you know, she's got tons of these flowers around her, you know, just kind of emblems and stuff. And so yeah, I don't know, I just kind of think that's beautiful. It's like together you guys crafted the beautiful country that you did. So it's like, even though you had a lot of responsibility kind of like shouldered onto you, it's like you had a lot of people who helped you kind of lift the burden. And the Four of Swords is laying in the church by himself usually. So it's like, with it being in reverse, you didn't have to do it by yourself, which I love. Okay, and so this here is going to be how this applies to your current life. And so for this one, we've got the Death card upright and the Puppeteer in reverse. So explanations and apologies. So Death card being upright, the Death card is usually all about kind of like these big ego deaths and these big changes that we need to make. One of the ways I used to describe this to people, because it is a little scary to kind of see this pop up in a reading, you know, death is so final and permanent, and like life is pretty fun sometimes. But you know, as we move through life, it's like we kind of experience and undergo different circumstances, events, and meet different people and stuff who kind of change us fundamentally. And like, once we undergo kind of certain changes, it's like we can't really go back to being the person who we were beforehand. So it's like essentially that past version of us is dead. We go through so many of these little changes throughout our lifetimes, it can kind of be hard to pinpoint these exact little transitions. But if you think about it, it's like the version of you that you are right now today is so drastically different from the version of you that you were when you were 4 years old or 10 years old, or, you know, 5 years ago, however old you may be, 10 years ago, you know, looking back, it's like you are such a drastically different version of you and person that essentially this past version of you might as well be dead. I feel like with the death also showing up next to like the twins in reverse and the kind of familial stuff that we talked about, I do feel like there was a death somewhere in the family here, and that would explain that kind of thrusting of responsibility here. And obviously a lot of times when kind of like, you know, you can't become the queen unless the previous queen is no longer in the picture. So I feel like that could have been a really big thing for you in that past life, was kind of like processing death, because sometimes it can be literal as well. And that could even be a thing that will be really hard for you in this lifetime too. But I really do feel like there is kind of like, yeah. The clarifying card here is the puppeteer. So explanations in reverse and apologies also in reverse. So kind of with this, it's like when you go through all of these different like either personal changes, we'll talk about that first. So when you're going through kind of like personal changes and stuff, you don't necessarily have to offer up explanations or apologies to the people around you. It's like you sometimes can just like make the changes that you need to make. And so, you know, with death, a lot of times, whether it be both physical or even sometimes kind of personal, sometimes we can't always necessarily pin down an exact explanation for it, or we don't get a chance to get apologies or kind of like last words in for them. I feel like maybe for some people, it's like even for the kind of like passing of your parents or your sibling, you may have never even really got an explanation for it. And that's maybe a reason why it just kind of like was so difficult for you. I feel like for some people too, with this kind of carrying over, I feel like some of you may have a really intense fear of death, or kind of like fear of the death of those around you. Or some of you may have even suffered like a kind of like sudden or tragic death early on in your life, whether it be kind of like your own personal parents or kind of like somebody else just like very important to you. It's actually interesting, and one of the other ones I specifically mentioned kind of like the foster family system as a family dynamic. I can't remember which one that was, if that was this one or reading number 2, but that may be a thing out there for some people. And so kind of just like, unfortunately, it's like in the past situation, it's like you were able to be kind of like adopted by the people around you, but in this lifetime you kind of unfortunately went through the system that you went through. So for those people, just the other side is greatly apologizing for that. Different times, different things, you know, and it is very unfortunate that, you know, the time and place is what it is, this one. But for other people here, it's like, you know, for the people who this is kind of like more talking about like a personal death or transformation that you're having to go through. So let's say there's been some big responsibility kind of thrust upon you, and now you have to be the bearer of this cup. You know, there's something about, it's like you don't really have to apologize for who it is that you kind of feel like you need to become or transition into for this lifetime, or like, you know, during this shift that you're going through. I feel like it's like, don't take that and like become arrogant and become just like a, you know, just like somebody who doesn't care about the people around you. But I feel like it's you know how some people like over apologize for things? You know, I used to do it myself. It's like a thing that gets kind of like ingrained in time, especially depending on kind of like your upbringing, you know, for some. And I feel like it's like there's something about it's like you don't have to do that. It's like just because you're acting or behaving, or you have to be a little bit different from who you were before, it's like, you know, as you go through and you make these shifts and transitions, you know, it's okay. You know, you don't have to apologize for anything. It's like for some people, I feel like it's like they feel a sense of like responsibility to who they are. And it's like they feel very tied down to like their kind of like ideal version of self, or not like ideal version of self, but it's like how they personally like view themselves. You know, just like don't be limited by that, if that is the case for some of these people here. But yeah, as you go through this big transition, it's like, do just recognize, you know, that, and try not to be controlling is another thing that popped out. The puppeteer is kind of like, I don't know, controlling. It looks like his little string is going through those people. For some people, if you got like a big promotion at like a, you know, your job or your office building or something like that, where you're in charge of people, make sure that you're being kind and you're just kind of like trying to be that little connecting force to them, because we're all going to pass away at some point. And so you want to spend as much time as you can loving the people around you, because we're only going to be here for a brief little bloop of time, you know? All right. So, Oracle card in reverse. So, birthing a new age in reverse. This is kind of interesting. I really wanted this one again to have a star seed kind of past life because I thought that would be fun, as I mentioned with the kiwi stone. But this being in reverse, it's really saying no to me. No star stuff here, just earth stuff. But birthing new creations and dreaming a new world into being. So, being in reverse, birthing a new age. Again, I feel like you did just kind of pick up the helm for something that was kind of like bequeathed to you. And so it's like you kind of carried the torch rather than creating something new. And I feel like that's even going to be what it is in this new lifetime. It's not necessarily that you're going to be starting something so entirely brand new by whatever this transition is that this is relating to your current lifetime in. Apologies for that. But yeah, and so it's like you can, I think it's like when you go through this transition, I guess know that it's like, you know, even though you had this kind of mentorship taken from you in this past lifetime, kind of with how we are today, it's like we have access to so much information that you can find mentors anywhere through books or website articles or blogs or YouTube videos, and you can kind of just like learn that way from people. So it's like you're not starting over entirely from scratch here. I think even in this past lifetime, even though your main mentor passed away, you still had a lot of people to help mentor you through the process. You can make it through this big transition, even though it may feel very scary and daunting with kind of like the responsibility of it all. But, you know, with the information around you, you'll be able to find kind of like the right mentors and people, whether it be person or article wise, that can help you kind of again, just take up the torch and handle this thing very well for yourself. So that is what I have for you guys. Thank you so much for watching pile number 3. And if you liked the decks that I used today, you know, most of these will be available on my website. I'm working on getting this particular deck as of the time of posting this video on there, but that should be available within a couple of months. But I've got this one and this deck. This is the Ethereal Visions by Matt Hughes, and this is the Citadel deck by Fez Inkrate. And yeah, if you want any personal readings, I do those on there, and I've got some other little art stuff and esoteric goodies that I make over on my website as well. So thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a like, comment, and subscribe down below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.